Hi, Mick McQuaid here to show you and share with you the syllabus for 620 um, Information and Interaction Design. This is a draft of today. It's a very, very minor update over the one that's been on my courses for a while, but it's important to keep in mind that the version on my courses always takes precedence if there are two versions. So I always intend to upload the most recent version if there are changes, if there are errors. Um, The main prerequisite for this course, which causes concern for some students, is experience with at least one prototyping tool. Now, I have taught this course previously in an on-site version, not an online version. Well, actually, I did teach it in an online version, in which I uh, was pretty lax about that requirement. And I discovered that being lax about that requirement caused some trouble. I had a group, actually, a pair of students working together, one of whom had no prototyping experience and was uh, affecting the grade of the other student who was having to carry all the weight. So this is an important requirement that you be able to generate some kind of a prototype. So this is an online course, and my intention is to be available on Google Chat. I have my office hours. If we go down here a little bit, we'll see that my office hours are noon to 2 on Monday and Wednesday. So I plan, other than short breaks for lunch or other natural causes, I plan to be in my office until 4 on Monday, whereupon I have to leave because I have a class, and to be available on Google Chat. And on most weeks, I will have a Google Chat, a Google Drive document open that you can join. Now, obviously, this is an online class, and so many of you won't be able to join at that time, but you should be able to insert material into those documents at other times that those of us who are there at that time can look at and potentially comment on. That will simply be potential for an interactive chat. Now, of course, there are some days I already know that I won't be there. September 7th, October 12th, and November 25th. These are all school holidays when I'm sure I won't be in the office. I can be reached by a Google Chat at other times, just on my phone. And it's fine with me for you to try to contact me at any time. I'm a grown-up and I can turn off my phone when I don't want to be contacted. So this version of the class takes place online, and that has some ramifications for this syllabus. This is the fall term. Final exam week for the fall term is the 14th through the 18th, and we'll have a final exam TBA during that period. I'm Mick McQuaid. I have an official RIT address, but you may not know this, but although students receive an official link to Google Drive through their RIT address, faculty do not have a default link, so I use my regular Gmail account. So you will see both of these emails, and I generally use this email address because I do a lot more stuff with Google Drive than than anything else. Here's my office, and as I say, I'll be in my office on, I'll expect generally to be in my office on Monday and Wednesday afternoon. So you can come and visit me there. In fact, you can join me during the Google Chat time, and if a number of you want to join me during that time, we can always move out to the lounge outside my office or to the open lab across the hall from my office, to be comfortable as a larger group. As I said before, those are my office hours, noon to 2. Here's a description of the course. And this course description, I think, was actually written by our dean, designing meaningful relationships among people and the products they use as both an art and a science. Okay, so HCI is about people and machines and what's between all of them, between people and people, between people and machines, and even potentially between machines and machines acting as agents of people. So this course will focus on the unique design practice of representing and organizing information in such a way as to facilitate perception and understanding, And unfortunately, they've used in the official course description this somewhat dated term, information architecture. This is no longer a an okay term to use with a lot of people. It's deprecated in a lot of a lot of HCI, mainstream HCI communities. Even the guy who coined the term has moved on, and I forgot what he uses now, but he uses different terms now. Specifying the appropriate mechanisms for accessing and manipulating task information, interaction design. And here again, we've used a somewhat dated term, task. So the evolution of the human-computer interaction world and the community associated with it has been such that it's moved way beyond tasks into human-computer interoperation, human-computer interaction in the fabric of life. This does not necessarily include tasks. This includes discretionary computing, community computing, and a variety of other things. So we will be going farther afield than this course description might suggest. We'll explore the various design patterns. Here is another unfortunate reference. Design patterns were originally promulgated by a group of computer programmers, Ralph Johnson, Eric Gamma, and two others whose names I'm blanking on right now, who developed design patterns for programming based on design patterns in architecture. And the person who invented the design patterns in architecture, Christopher Alexander, gave them a very rigorous definition, which, to the extent that they could, the gang of four, Gamma and Johnson and the other two, I'm still blanking on their names, followed these very rigorous definitions. Well, in the last decade, people have used the expression design patterns now in the HCI world as well as in many other worlds with less rigor. There are a number of things that are called design patterns that don't fit any definition that I will accept of design patterns. So we'll explore what people call design patterns and maybe what would be needed to advance those to the level of design patterns that the Gang of Four or Christopher Alexander developed in their domains. Students will need prior knowledge of an interface prototyping tool. So, and you'll be welcome to use what you want. We're going to be judging your prototypes rather than your tools. And I'll have a great deal to say about the interface prototyping tools that people use. I don't like to enforce tools because I've been teaching this course, not at this school, but I've been teaching it at University of Michigan since about 2006, I think. And the available tools have changed. And before that, I taught a lot of other kinds of courses, including prototyping, for which the tools changed drastically. I've been teaching since what you might think of as prehistory. And the tool set changes, and in every generation, students say, well, this is it. This tool, this is going to last forever. It's like the 1,000-year Reich, you know. It's going to go away very sooner than you may think. So I don't want to legislate any tools, and I want you to be aware of the tools that your classmates are using that are perhaps the new hotness, but and you may want to gain some familiarity with them, but you don't want to depend on them. Students often list a lot of tools on their resume. I've had to hire people where they list a bunch of tools on their resume, and I ask them about the tools, and they don't know enough about the tools to do the job. I mean, they know the menus and so on. Tools are tools are just tools. They're not a guarantee that you have any idea what you're doing. Okay, so now I have a fairly lengthy list of objectives for the course, and these will become more clear over time. They're expressed somewhat tersely. Identify complementary skills and congruent domains among potential project group partners. You'll have to do a group project in this class, and you have to figure out what domains you're interested in. And by a domain, I mean a domain of interest. A domain of interest might be medicine, transportation, entertainment. Those are things that I think of as domains. These are not technology specific. These represent domains in which people have needs for which they use technology. complementary skills. So these would be technological skills, although there are also skills such as writing and skills in art that aren't tied to any particular technology. Conduct iterative design, including design, prototyping, and evaluation. So that's the main task that you have to do this term, is that you will have to do a design and prototype it and evaluate it. You'll have to conduct a contextual inquiry. There are many ways to design the user experience, and contextual inquiry is just one of them. But you will have a project in doing it that way. We'll talk about some of the other ways, ethnography and so on. But what we will do in this course will be a contextual inquiry, and you'll have a very short time to do it. You will have to construct personas that are suggested by your contextual inquiry. That will be a project milestone in that. And you'll have to construct scenarios that are appropriate to a set of personas. So there are many approaches and plenty of valid criticism of the use of things like scenarios and personas. But this is an exercise that you're going to need to get through. These are prevalent things that people often do. I will also ask you to construct a low fidelity prototype using pencil and paper. In fact, you'll perhaps be a little surprised at how much pencil and paper I'll ask you to use in this class. And I do mean pencil and paper. I don't mean stylus and tablet. I mean pencil and paper. And we'll talk more about why I want you to do that. Then the last thing that you'll do here will be to construct a high fidelity prototype using tools of your own choosing. And a high fidelity prototype will be a prototype that enables some interaction. So that will probably be done using a computer. And then you'll have to evaluate your high fidelity prototype using either heuristic evaluation. This is a very old and common way of evaluating prototypes, or you can use you will be allowed to use other methods. You'll have to be able to sketch designs, and I prefer that you do this with pencil and paper for the most part, quickly and with facility. So you'll have to be able to go into a meeting and sketch a design in general, these days in 2015 as I'm recording this, on a whiteboard with a marker or a bunch of markers. That's how it will develop in real life, at least right now. And you'll have to practice that. You'll have to solve generic design problems in an ad hoc group, and by an ad hoc group I mean a group that's formed 1 week for that week's exercise. And you'll have to master both divergent activities, which are necessary in order for the problem to be solved in a creative way, and convergent activities, which will enable a problem to be solved by a deadline. You'll have to be able to tell the story of a design problem and a solution to it through sketches. You'll have to be able to contribute, in addition to ad hoc projects, just weekly exercises that you'll do with an ad hoc group that you just work with that 1 week and you never work with again. You will establish in this course one project group. That is a project group that will last throughout the entire semester, that will do a single project over the course of the whole semester. And you'll have to create a project group website that will communicate the substance of this semester-long project. And you'll have to work with a client, and you should work with a client whose constraints are not under your control. Constraints is the key word in this entire course. You have to work with constraints. Design, according to one of the most famous designers, is constraints. Design is what happens when conflicting constraints come together. Okay, now the objectives are also conceptual, so I want you to understand things, and these are the kinds of things that you might be asked in an interview, or that you might be asked in just a discussion about HCI, but that are not necessarily evident in projects, in the artifact of a project. You can't just show me in your sketchbook, for example, that you understand the role of constraints. You may have understood the role of constraints in a specific design problem as evidenced by your sketchbook, but you may not be able to articulate what you understand. So these concepts are things that you can articulate. You have to be able to articulate the concept of affordances. This is the most basic HCI concept affordances. Understand the history of and the basic definitions of other terms besides affordances that are common in the UX world. You have to be able to understand the theories, and there are really only two theories that have great longevity, which are Fitz's law and Hicks' law. And you have to understand them, understand the theories, be able to articulate, be able to explain the theories. And by theory here, I'm talking about a mechanism. You have to be able to understand different paradigms of interaction, interaction styles, ways to elicit and interpret verbal information from users of a system. So there are two sort of, well, there's one really venerable way, protocol analysis for doing this, and then there's another way, verbal analysis, which is not as time-honored, but still worth knowing about. Understand the role of collaboration among users. So not all of what we care about is what happens between the user and the computer. Some of it is what happens between one user and another user. And by the way, user is a dirty word. I keep using it, but you're not supposed to use it. We're generally supposed to say something like participants when we speak of people and computers. But I'm constantly using the word users. Understand different ways to measure quality of service. Understand the role of emotion in interaction design. Emotion is very important, not only the emotions of people, but also emotions as are expressed by machines. Understanding the relevant characteristics of a range of interaction devices. So many interaction devices are in common use, and they're being used in often in surprising ways. So often the most interesting information-intensive products in the world use relatively old technology, but use it in some new way. There's some sort of new form of interaction. Understand software documentation and the phenomena that's replacing it. So software documentation remains important in enterprise use, but for lots of types of use, software documentation is on the decline, and it's being replaced by things like YouTube and user forums. We have no textbook, except that I have a set of lecture notes that might as well be a textbook. It's over 100 pages long, and that's on my courses. And it will be altered on my courses. It contains some material that I need to remove right now. The version that's on my courses on August 23rd has material that I'm going to take out, and I will probably add additional information too. Now, as I mentioned, there are two versions of the class. I'm going to show you, even though I'm doing this video for the online version on August 23rd, 2015. See, the online version is in the fall semester, and then the on-site version in the spring semester. So I'm going to show you what the on-site version gets, because I want you to do something very similar. So for the on-site version, you should be prepared to bring a paper notebook to class every day and be prepared to turn it in frequently. In fact, actually, what I have discovered lately is that every student has a smartphone with a good camera. All except for one student. All have a good smartphone with a good camera, and so they're able to take pictures of it and put the pictures on my courses. So I actually don't really need people to turn it in anymore. The notebook should be about 5 by 8.25 inches. That size limitation may sound really arbitrary, but it has a couple of advantages. It makes it easier for me to collect and organize and scan and grade things. And I do actually, in the on-site version, I still do collect them sometimes because I want to look through the whole sketchbook at once. And I have a particular kind of book that I use, and I list here a number of different variations. I list Moleskine, Leuchtturm, Field Notes, and a bunch of other brands. This particular one is a Moleskine. I don't know if you can see it here. Let's see, where's my camera? Oh, okay, here's the camera. So I need to put it like this. And mine is a Moleskine of the 5 by 8.25 dimension. I also have around here some other ones. I have Leuchtturm and some other brands. I don't want you to deviate from the size. I don't care if it has a graph or plane or lines or whatever you want. Dots. There are some that have just dots instead of lines to help you draw straight lines. It just doesn't matter. But the size matters. Size always matters, no matter what the movie posters say. And 3 by 5 and 8 by 10 are too much of a deviation. The number of pages is not important. I always use this kind that's called cahier, which has, I think, 48 pages or 64 pages. Let me see, my cover is falling apart here. Doesn't say on it, but it's something like that. 48 pages is what I expect you're going to use in the course of this term in this book, and then some students end up getting a couple of those. It's harder if you get the really thick ones. I have some of the thick ones here, and the problem with those is that when you go to take pictures of them, this is a different brand, but this is a thick one, which when you lay it down, it's hard to take a photograph of it. Oops. It's hard to get it to lay down flat. The cahier version will quite easily lay down flat, and so you can easily take pictures of it and put it on my courses, which is how most people will share it. And I only want you to write or draw in it. I would rather you not staple or paste scans or photos into it. I have had occasions when people forgot their notebook and they did their sketch on another piece of paper and stapled that in. That's one thing. But I had this one student who insisted that he couldn't draw. And that is not the case. He could draw. He simply refused to draw. And he instead wanted to web surf and cut and paste things and print things out from the web in place of sketching. And if you think back to what I said before about how you'll have to go into a meeting and put stuff up on the whiteboard with a marker and react very quickly to what people say in the meeting, cutting and pasting stuff from web pages is not a substitute for that. It may be auxiliary to that, but it is not a substitute for being able to sketch by hand. You have to be able to sketch by hand. So all the work in the notebook should be in pen or pencil, preferably pencil. I had one student last term who used a pen, and I thought it hurt his work a lot. Okay, now you're in the online version of the course, and yet I still want you to have roughly this page size, and that may seem counterintuitive. It makes it easier for me to review what you're doing if I know that they were the same size. And even if you zoom in or out with your camera to make the photographs of them the same size, there are physical characteristics. The size of your hands, while variable, is not that variable. The size of the human hand, of an adult human hand, is not that variable. The size of a number 2 pencil is not that variable. The point of the number 2 pencil is not that variable. There is a distinct difference between the look of an 8 by 10 notebook that's been filled in by a skilled person and a 5 by 8 notebook that's been filled in by a skilled person. So I want everyone to do it the same way. I want everyone to fill in the same size. And I've picked 5 by 8. So please adhere to that. I would appreciate it very much if you would adhere to that. So you need a phone or a tablet with a camera or a dedicated camera. I don't care if you actually use a camera. And I'm using a laptop camera here, which I'm terrible at using. I also have actually a tablet camera and a phone camera off to the side, and I often will use a dedicated camera. For different purposes, different things are needed. But you need something that allows you to take pictures. Obviously, in the online version, you have a great deal more flexibility because you're not coming to a classroom. You're probably in your own work environment, and so you don't have to remember to bring a camera with you someplace. I will not teach any specific software packages in this class. And one student aggravated me very much last term by writing about it in the course evaluation. He was upset that I did not teach software packages in the class. And I don't really want to spend a lot of time explaining why this is. I have spent a lot of time deciding not to teach software packages in this class. And I don't want to spend a lot of time explaining why it is. It should become apparent over time. If you are getting frustrated about that, though, I would appreciate it if you would contact me online and I can go into more detail about that. We'll be using Google Drive. Even if you're using Google Drive, though, you may not realize this, but there are plenty of different applications that can be used now with Google Drive. Google Drive is getting more open all the time, and you don't necessarily have to use Chrome. You don't necessarily have to use any specific browser, and there are all kinds of editing plugins available, many of which don't work very well, by the way. I mean, I've been using Google Drive since it came out in a classroom situation, and it was a disaster the first semester that it came out. Even for a small class, it was catastrophic trying to get 20 people to edit one document at the same time. But it gets better all the time, and so it's quite worth using. Okay, so here's an estimated course schedule. This is 17 weeks, one item per week here. And then the 17th week is that December 14th through 18th period. Here's our grading schedule. This is pretty much a school-wide grading schedule. And here is a grading schedule. Or that's not a grading schedule. This is a grading, what do you call this? A grading scale. That's what I meant. This is the grading scale. This is the grading schedule. And it's listed by the weeks that things are due. And a lot of these things are individual, like group, what do you call it, ad hoc group things. But some of them are the semester-long group project. So project focus, for example, contextual inquiry, personas and scenarios, lo-fi prototype, hi-fi prototype, and final exam. These are all conducted on the basis of the semester-long project. So 40% of what was above are project milestones, 20% is exam, and 40% is in-class exercises. And I should point out that the exam is really about the project. I'm going to be asking you questions about the project. So even though the final exam, you'll be expected to answer these questions individually, they relate to your project. Okay, and then the last item on the syllabus is all these policies. Now these policies are pretty much the same for every class, so consequently what teachers like to do is just say you're responsible for it and leave it at that. 2 semesters ago I had a student, I did this, and I had one student who cheated. Let me just go to the academic dishonesty policy. And his reaction when I accused him of cheating was, I don't know you were serious about that. I really didn't, you didn't go over it in class. And plus, I've got an attorney who thinks this is not, this will never stand up in court. And he was just on and on about this. But in fact, I had already verified, I had already marshaled a huge amount of evidence. I didn't want to accuse anybody of cheating. So I verified that there could be no question about it. Worked with other students and other faculty. I mean, everybody knew that this guy was cheating, except him. It was a big mistake for him when I confronted him about it to act like it was A, no big deal, and B, he couldn't be expected to go to this website. The link doesn't work to this website. So all of that is your responsibility. Everything on here is your responsibility. If the link doesn't work and you suffer consequences from it, I will turn a deaf ear to your complaints. There's no extra credit. If you have a notice of accommodation, I'm not the only one who needs to know about it. If you have accommodations, there are a lot of other people who have to schedule their activities around your accommodations, depending on the types of accommodations that we're talking about. So you have to give this to me early so that we can do scheduling and make things happen. You don't get any credit for turning in something late. And I had also last semester, in fact, in this class, it's very embarrassing for a graduate student. I expect more of graduate students than undergraduates, by the way. And it was very embarrassing, I thought, for this graduate student to say, well, I didn't think you were serious about that. She said it a little more, in a more articulate manner than the freshman that I was parodying there from the previous semester. But still, it's pitiful to complain that you didn't see this, or you don't know it, or it doesn't matter, or I heard that you treated other people better and you just don't like me, or what, all these kinds of things. Just forget about all of that stuff. Just deal with this. Oh wow, I have, I have last semester's add drop dates on here. So I can actually tell you, let me just say, I'll fix this in the syllabus, but I don't want to have to re-record the whole darn thing. So let me just find the add drop date here. Bear with me just a moment, please. I'm terribly sorry for this. I'll correct this in the syllabus online. Okay, so here's another syllabus that I know has it. So the actual last day of add drop is going to be Monday, 31 August, and the last day to withdraw with W is going to be Friday, 13 November. Okay, so that's about it for the policies. In fact, that's about it for the syllabus. So let me just challenge you to think about what you're going to do this semester. Let me have one last word here, and perhaps reward you for listening to all this boring talking. So I would like you to think of a spectrum of work that on one end is highly structured, very little discretion, low pay, very entry level. You have no latitude. You have to do what you're told. To the opposite extreme, very unstructured work. Nobody tells you what to do. You've got to figure it out for yourself. As graduate students, guess which end of the spectrum I want you to work toward. And these two examples I'm going to show you are very extreme. No one would be at either. Well, hopefully no one would be at these extremes. But here's an example. Here's an extreme example of someone who, this is a check-in person. I don't know if you can see the words check-in there. In a hospital, they're checking in patients, and here's a patient who's about to try to be checked in. And this person is not involved in her job. And she doesn't have much latitude. She's just got this menu. She can pick an illness from the menu, a diagnosis from the... And she finally settles on, I don't know. I mean, that's the best that she can come up with. So, hey, thanks. So that's the, sort of dramatization of the most structured job that I can possibly imagine. Here's the other end of the spectrum. Here we have an astronaut whose job includes trying to stay alive under somewhat trying circumstances. She's trying to get into this escape pod, and the escape pod is messed up. Its parachute is already deployed, so even once she gets in it, she has little chance of survival. She's got to try to ditch the parachute and then use this escape pod, which has all of its instructions in Russian, and she's American, she doesn't speak any Russian apparently, to get to a Chinese escape pod, which hopefully does have still a working parachute, and which has all instructions in Chinese. So that's her work, and she's also got debris flying at her at 1,000 miles an hour, and also no one has ever experienced this before. And also all contact with Houston is cut off, and she only has hallucinations of stuff to help her. So that's the most unstructured that it could get. I mean, just getting, into the spaceship is a challenge that no one else has ever met before. Now, obviously, I don't want you to die in space, but I want you to be able to deal with a somewhat unstructured job. I want you to be able to deal with a more unstructured job than one where you would get a checklist of things to do. So think about that when you come to me and ask for a checklist of things to do, and say, "Your instructions are too vague. Don't make me, don't make me think." That's actually the title of an HCI book. Don't make me think. I have to make you think. I mean, there's no point in you becoming a master's student. There's no point in you trying to move on in your career unless you're prepared to try to solve problems that nobody's ever solved before, preferably not, weightless and in a vacuum and with exploding debris around. But that side of the spectrum, I want you to think in terms of this spectrum from unstructured to highly structured. And I want you to take responsibility. And I am looking forward to seeing you in class going toward the unstructured end of the spectrum. Thanks.